which means we've got to wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plains of the internet before we go ahead and get started. It is Ghislaine Maxwell trial day 12. Before we jump into it, we got to make sure that the stream is working. We're, of course, at watchingthewatchers.locals.com where they're chatting away over there. Shout out to my brothers and sisters over at Locals. But it looks like we're alive elsewhere across the board, so let's get to it, shall we? Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. Today, we're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. Trial day 12 and the last trial day of testimony that we're going to see. They're done. The defense rested their case today, caught a lot of people by surprise, and so we're going to break down what happened. It was actually a very short day. They wrapped up early this afternoon. The defense rested, and that was it. 2 days of presentation from this defense. They told us that they were going to be presenting 35 witnesses, give or take, and they didn't. It was just a handful of people, and that was the end of it. And so we've got a lot to get to and break down. We're going to start off by maybe trying to identify why this was such a quick resolution, a quick presentation of the defense case in chief. This was supposed to be a multi-million-dollar defense. They were supposed to bring out people that were going to be ripping this prosecution apart. Where were all those people? And we're going to find out because the judge came out with some interesting rulings this morning. We're going to review them. Christian Everdell was out in court today, and good logic, Joe Nierman, is going to give us an update. Of course, he was there in court today, boots on the ground, doing the good work reporting, and he gave us a little bit of a rundown on what happened in court after the Judge Allison Nathan, gave a ruling. We have now another witness that we're going to check in with. This is somebody that raised a lot of eyebrows. We've got Epstein's former ex-girlfriend, Eva Andersson-Dubin, I think something like that, Dubin, former Miss Universe of Sweden. We have a clip of that, which is fun. So we're going to talk about her because they brought her in here to ask her if she participated in adult activities of a group variety, multiple people participating in activities. They asked her, did you do that type of stuff? Were you frolicking around with Epstein and Maxwell and Jane and Kate and Caitlin and all these other women? She is going to answer that for us today in court. We have another individual, somebody named Michelle Healy, who worked at the J. Epstein Company. She got the same question. Were you a part of that little entourage over there? Yes or no? So we'll see what she had to say. And then the big question, of course, comes out. Was Ghislaine Maxwell going to testify? Turns out she didn't. Obviously, it was never going to happen. Good call on that one. Could have been a big can of worms there. No reason for her to do so. Really seems like no reason for the defense to do much of anything because they didn't do much of anything. We had 2 days, really like 1.5 days, maybe like 1.25 days if you really calculate it all up. And there wasn't much to go on. We have some stipulations that got read in at the end of the day today. We're going to take a look at that Lion King movie versus the Lion King play. Remember we talked about this yesterday? If Jane saw the movie and not the play, then maybe she was a minor. But if she saw the play and not the movie, well, she's probably over the age of consent. Therefore, no conviction. So we've got a lot to get to there. We're going to be, as I mentioned, talking about this is the order from Judge Allison Nathan. I forgot I put the preview slides here today. This is the next witness we're going to talk about. This is Eva Andersson-Dubin. And then our last segment, we're going to be hearing about Ghislaine Maxwell. You can see a preview of that. There she is in court today, along with her attorneys. If you want to be a part of the show, we're taking questions over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Looks just like this. There's a form right there that is available if you want to ask a question, and you're a supporter over there. We'll take those. We also take, of course, super chats. If you send anything in via YouTube, they pop up on the screen just like that. We appreciate your support there, YouTube. We also have a Clips channel. Clips channel is here, and this is where you can share segments or little splices of the show with friends or family, and we appreciate a subscription over there. We also have the poll form, which is now available. It is pinned up in the YouTube comments in the chat box. Let's see what people have to say about it. So this is the comment form. These are the questions that we're asking today. First of all, verdict. How about a response? Do we have a verdict? Do we have a response? And we do. We've got some people who are saying that it's looking like there will be a guilty verdict. 20% of people say there will be a guilty verdict. 18% of people say that there will be a not guilty verdict. We have 50% say that there's going to be a split verdict. So maybe she'll be convicted on some and acquitted on the others. And then we've got 12% saying it's a hung jury. We're not going to get a verdict. Asked if the trial is rigged, yes or no, 95% say, yeah, it's rigged. Trial's rigged. All right. And then, of course, the question that has been on here for a long time, we've got a lot of responses out of this. We have, did Epstein kill himself? 62% of people say, yeah, he was killed. 10% say, yeah, he killed himself. 61% say, no, he was killed. 23% say he was still alive, actually. So, yeah, and there's just a small sliver that say, we don't know. So keep those votes coming in. Verdict still looking like it's about 46% looking like a split verdict. And so we'll keep our eyeballs on that one as this show unfolds. So let's get into it, shall we? Ghislaine Maxwell trial, day 12. We've got the final day of testimony, the final day of both sides presenting any evidence. The case in chief for the defense has now come to a close, but not without a little bit of contention this morning. We have the defense. They kind of didn't want to finish today. The judge issued some rulings, and they had to get this thing wrapped up because they couldn't get their witnesses here. There were a lot of people, including an 81-year-old guy from the UK that used to sort of run a pub that was across the street from Ghislaine Maxwell's residence. He's in the UK, and the defense say, hey, we need to get this guy here. The judge says, well, clock's ticking there. If he's not here by the end of the day today, well, you're running out of time, aren't you? And so the defense kind of is making a claim that they want this guy here, but we also have to be thinking like defense attorneys, which I happen to be. And so you can see what they also may be trying to do, which is to etch something in the document, etch something in the ground, draw a line in the sand and say, we have not been given the opportunity to have a fair trial. We wanted to bring in our key witnesses for crucial issues, and the judge didn't allow us to do that. What does that sound like? A violation of somebody's right to due process or a right to a fair trial. This judge sounds pretty impartial. We couldn't even present our entire case because this judge wouldn't let us have a witness here from the UK, and he was critical. And so this was something that was fought over a lot this morning. You can see as a quick reminder, this is Ghislaine Maxwell supported by her defense team. And we're checking in with Inner City Press reporting, of course. They're telling us that the defense first thing this morning was arguing. They wanted to keep this case open until Monday. They say, we've got this 81-year-old witness who we're going to learn about in a minute, and he's not even here yet. The judge said, all right, hold off a minute. Let's take a look at some of these other issues that are bandied about. Okay, Judge Nathan says, I'm going to be letting in the documents about residence versus the documents about ownership. Okay, we're talking about different properties. We're talking about Epstein now. He's got a place in Palm Beach. He's got a place in New Mexico. He's got a mansion in New York. He's also got a place in London. And so Kate, if you recall, was talking about that mansion in London that apparently she went to. And so we're talking about all these different documents, residence and ownership, and there's a lot of questions there. So Judge Nathan asked Maxwell's lawyer, is this a deposition transcript? Is this new to you? And so they talk about a transcript and they move on. So they are fighting about these issues, about what witnesses can be called. And now Judge Nathan says, well, guys, listen, I know you're kind of running out of witnesses in court, but I have a rule, she says. You have your next witness or you rest. If otherwise the case closes today, it closes today. See what she says? If there is no next witness, you're done. So line them up. Bring them in, set them up one after the other. And you saw, we've covered it here, how Judge Nathan runs her courtroom. She'll take a witness at 4:52, I think was yesterday. Maybe 4:54. I don't remember how late it was. But it was late. Next witness. And so if you don't have your next witness, what her rule is in her courtroom, you're done. Get them lined up. We're not going to be waiting around forever to be, hauling witness. Okay, well, you can have 3 extra days to get your people here. You knew when the trial was. Get your witnesses in order and get them here. Now, the problem, the corollary to this is that you've got the judge who hasn't ruled on a lot of these issues yet. Remember, previously this week, we spent a lot of time talking about the defense trying to get other witnesses in particular, those 3 different attorneys that represented some of the victims. Still didn't really know whether they were going to be allowed to be called or not. Is the judge going to allow them to call these key witnesses? If the answer is yes, well, then they got to get them here like right now, because that's the judge's rule. So are all these people ready and on standby? Because you know that these memos and these letters are being submitted to the court, hashing these issues out, sometimes at 10 p.m. at night. So it's all hands on deck. Everything is a last minute, yes, get here, whatever, because the judge issued a ruling. So Maxwell's lawyer, they say, look, if the marshals can produce another witness, we've sent marshals out. We've went and subpoenaed somebody. If the marshals can go get that person, well, we need more time. But we have another witness who we've actually issued a subpoena for who is not here. If they bring them here, well, then we can continue on. But if they don't bring them here, we're in trouble. Now, again, this is setting it up again. In the case of the 81-year-old gentleman who we're going to learn about, Judge Nathan is kind of saying, well, you know, he's too far. He's far away. I'm not going to let you let this witness come in. That's a little bit different now. This is a judge saying you can't have access to a key witness that you say you need. This is a judge violating due process. Now, let's say the Maxwell's defense team issued a subpoena for somebody else, a lawful order. The judge signed off on this. You have to come to court now. You serve that subpoena to somebody, and somebody says, I'm not coming to court. And you say, as a defendant, I need that person to come to court. Their testimony is critical to my case. They've got a lawful order. They're here in the country. A judge told them to be here. They're not here. Without their testimony, I can't proceed. Sounds like a due process violation. Sounds like maybe she's not getting a fair trial. Uh-oh. And now because they're missing another key witness, not only the bar guy from the UK, but also this other witness that got a lawful subpoena, the marshals, even the U.S. marshals can't get this person here. All right, so they're just going to chalk that one up on the list of appealable issues. Just put that in the old memory bank for them. Other witness from the UK, they said, they want him to come in if they will stipulate to it, if they will just agree to it. They don't need the witness to come in from the UK. We don't need this guy to actually come here and talk if the government will agree to the data that we want to get in. U.S. attorney says no stipulation. Have no idea what they'd say. Now, the judge turns back over. They spend a lot of time talking about these prior inconsistent statements. This is kind of an important thing, but it can get very technical very quickly. So I want to just kind of cover the concept generally, right? A prior inconsistent statement would be something that you would use not to prove anything, but to show somebody was sort of being dishonest or to impugn their credibility. We call it impeachment. And so there's a lot of back and forth about this morning, and we're going to listen to Joe Nierman, who's going to tell us a little bit more about that. And so put a pin in this section right here. We're going to come back to this in a minute, talking about Christian Everdell and really the prior inconsistent statements of law enforcement about the government's investigation, about this entire prosecution. Because remember, we talked about this previously on the mind map. You remember that there was that expert witness, Bennett Gershman, who was the prosecutorial misconduct expert witness. This guy wrote the treatise on, why prosecutions are bad, essentially. And they were going to bring this guy in to, rebut several different claims or several different allegations by the defense that the prosecutions were attempting to manipulate Jane's memory, essentially, by having her flip her testimony from saying that she went and saw the Lion King Broadway show to say, no, that's not what I saw. I actually saw the movie. They were alleging that the prosecution was trying to get her to change her story. And Bennett Gershman was going to be the expert to come in and just blow that out of the park. And we're going to see that doesn't really happen here. The defense is done. It's all rested. Why? So put a pin in that. We're going to get back there. Before we do, let's talk a little bit more about this pub guy. This guy was going to be that 81-year-old witness that they were talking about. There's a little bit of an interesting story here. So we didn't actually hear from this guy, but here's what he would have come and presumably talked about. The judge did not let him in. He was a landlord back at a London pub. It's called the Nag's Head, and it's in an exclusive part of London. It's in Belgravia. And it is located directly opposite a house where Maxwell used to live. So earlier this morning, he was expected to fly out there. You can see in this article, they said he's expected to fly out to testify on behalf of Maxwell. He didn't comment when they reached out to him. But he had this, or he was at least running this place. It's called the Nag's Head. And you can see it's sort of this exclusive pub, I think, in the UK, in London, in a very exclusive town. Ghislaine Maxwell apparently owned this property right next door. And so she was living there. And so if you remember way back earlier on in the trial when the government was presenting their case, we heard from Kate. And Kate, during her testimony, she said that Maxwell called her, quote, a good girl. Where did this happen? It happened right there in London. It was when Epstein was there in London at his mansion in Belgravia. And she was a teenager. Epstein brought her there. Maxwell brought her there. During her direct exam, when the government called her, she said she was just 17. Apparently, according to Kate, she said that Maxwell let her up there. Maxwell committed some sort of an act on her. And then Maxwell came out afterwards and said, how'd it go? Did you have fun? Was it good? Remember that line of testimony? And so if Kate comes out and says this all happened in London, and the government comes out and says, yeah, Maxwell was in London, why do we need this guy to come out and testify? Well, Mr. Moran, the pub guy, is going to come out and he's going to say that he knew the previous owners of that home. And he could verify she didn't live there until 1997 when she bought the property. She wasn't there, right? So when Kate is alleging that all this took place, Maxwell wasn't even anywhere near there. Everdell now, Maxwell's defense attorney, said this is a critical issue. He was supposed to be flown out at 11 a.m., but the judge seemed annoyed at the latest attempt to call a new witness. The previous night, Maxwell's lawyer said they wanted to call 3 other women named Eva, Kelly, and Michelle, but their plans fell apart. Why? Kelly refused to show up, didn't respond to the subpoena that was issued 2.5 weeks ago. So you can see here the defense is laying out a couple different violations, right? Or they're going to make these arguments. I'm not saying that they are justified arguments, but they're going to make the arguments. Number one, that Moran couldn't be here. The judge got annoyed. The judge didn't want this last witness to come in here. And I don't know specifically what happened in court, but maybe the judge did not allow him, said, nope, you're done. You ran out of time. You got to rest. He's not here. He's still on the airplane. Maybe it was 11 a.m. And so they're done. So Moran, violation. Didn't get to hear from him. Okay, we got oppressed or, whatever. The prosecution didn't allow us to present our case. That's a violation of due process. Same type of thing is going to happen here with this other witness. This is Kelly. Kelly got delivered a subpoena. Laura Menninger said we sent it 2.5 weeks ago. She still has not shown up. Therefore, violation. U.S. Marshals couldn't even find this person. She was also integral to our case. Now, you'll notice that they were also wrapping up these 2 other women, Eva and Michelle, and we do hear from both of them today. But before we get there, let's check back in with Judge Nathan. Inner City Press is reporting this is still during the morning session before the jurors are even brought in. Annie, according to Judge Nathan, said that she didn't remember a chef being there on Zorro Ranch, but that it made sense to her. So it's not inconsistency. Talking about these impeachment issues. Okay, can we impeach Annie? Remember Annie Farmer? She was the 4th victim who testified. She said something about not recalling that a chef was there. And then Epstein's attorneys are saying, well, there was a chef. There was one on payroll. See this guy? There were 3 of them. So she's a moron. All right. And we want to show that. We want to show the jurors that she's an idiot and she doesn't remember anything because there are a bunch of chefs right here. And the judge is saying, look, she didn't say that there were not any there. She said she didn't remember them being there, but it made sense if they were there, and it wasn't like that. So no, I'm not going to let you do that. Right? It's not on point enough. And they're saying the same thing about horseback riding. Annie got up there and testified about horseback riding, whatever it is she said, in the reality and the truth of the matter. This is how it is. We want to tell the jurors that she's a liar about that too. And the judge is saying, look, it's not even relevant. It's a collateral issue. Sometimes they ride horses, sometimes they don't. Move on. Maxwell's lawyer continues. Well, Judge, I know those are your rulings, but I think impeachment is for the truth of the matter asserted. And the judge just starts laughing. Well, that's way too metaphysical for me to handle right now there, Maxwell lawyer. Way too metaphysical for me. You think impeachment is for the truth of the matter asserted? Now you're sort of talking about a hearsay rule on top of the impeachment rules, on top of stipulated, or the judge says, I've had enough. I just got done. She goes, do you know where I was yesterday? Do you have any idea? Yeah. The Judiciary Committee. I'm exhausted. I can't think about hearsay and impeachment proceedings right now. Laughs it off. Maxwell's lawyer says, okay, listen, Judge, listen. We'll have a law enforcement witness, and we'd like to ask leading questions. Remember, yesterday we heard from the Customs and Border Patrol officer, and today they want to bring out somebody else, a law enforcement witness that they want to ask leading questions about. Judge Nathan says, well. The truth comes out on the direct, so start with that. No leading questions. Don't ask yes or no questions or questions that will deliver a yes or no response. Ask the open-ended questions. No special rules with these people. But Maxwell's lawyer says, yeah, I know. Okay, but Judge, I want to get to the absence of evidence. Okay, I can't ask specific questions about something that there is an absence of. So, for example, I want to ask about the lack of GPS given the age of the allegations. Right? So what she's saying is, I want to go in there with a leading question and say, officer, or special agent, or whatever your name is, Johnson, Special Agent Johnson, isn't it true that back in 1994, there were no GPS records involved in this case? And he's going to say what? A yes or no response, right? That's a leading question. Yes, that's true. Yes. And the judge is saying, well, you can't do that. This is a direct exam. And so you need to just kind of go out there and start with open-ended questions on your next witness. And she says, well, I can't do that because that would look like me saying, okay, officer, is there anything missing in this case that you might have in a current case in 2021? And the officer's like, what the heck are you talking about? Is there anything missing in this case that could have been around in 19? What are you talking about? Because you can't, it's hard to ask an open. Is there any type of technology now that would have helped you pinpoint a location back in 1994? And oh yeah, well, GPS. And so she wants to lead him down there without making him explain it all. And the judge, starts to get into that a little bit. That's what they're talking about. So she says the absence of evidence. Maxwell's lawyer says, I wanted to ask the agent more specifically that the complaint was first one on a time frame, was the first one on the time frame. And then there was a more recent one with Carolyn. She says, I think that's relevant. Prosecutor chimes in. Sorry, Judge. Court has already ruled on this, okay? Follows the path of the investigation. We don't need to rehash this out again. It follows the path of the investigation. The complaint, the defense is not allowed to just sort of circumvent the path of the investigation. They don't get to ask questions about whatever they want. You've already ruled on this. We follow the path of the investigation. We're going to follow it chronologically. If they have any problems about any of this stuff, they can raise it in closing. And Joe is going to explain what is happening right there in that segment. We're going to see it. But I want to show you this as well. The court is denying the motion for the remaining witnesses the government seeks to preclude. So we've got sort of like a double negative, multiple different, the court is denying the motion, which I think was the motion to preclude, or this could have been the defense motion that the government was responding to. The point here, the judge is denying the motion for the remaining witnesses. Now, what's happening? Do you remember that when we go back over to the mind map, we spent a lot of time talking about the defense calling a number of different witnesses to buttress several people that the government proffered forth? And we didn't get any of them today. It's because of motions like this, and it's because of what Joe is about to explain, talking about one of the defense's main strategies sort of being cut out from under them. Here is Joe Nierman. Good logic over on YouTube. His link is down in the description below. Please go subscribe. He's amazing.
Locked in closing arguments for this Monday. And for those of you who are wondering, how did we get here so fast? Earlier in the week, we heard that the defense had 35 witnesses, and that seems like it would take a couple of weeks to get through. And sure enough, we heard from under a dozen witnesses in 2 days, and we're going to closing arguments. Well, part of the answer lies in legal arguments that were held before the court this morning. Christian Everdell, on behalf of the defense, was stating that they wanted to bring forward various FBI agents and question them about what happened with evidence. The defense feels that the government intentionally omitted searching in certain areas out of fear that they would end up coming across evidence that would exonerate Ghislaine Maxwell. And the court responded saying, I previously issued a ruling consistent with Second Circuit decisions and the way we operate things here in New York, saying that you cannot make this case and your defense about what the government did or did not do in their investigations. You can only make it about, did the government prove its case? And that's more of an appropriate thing to do in closing argument than to do via questioning a witness. So, for example, in closing arguments, the defense is permitted to say, there's no emails. We don't see any emails here that prove their case. We don't have phone records that prove their case. We're lacking in this testimony. We didn't hear from these other people. That they're permitted to do. But they cannot come forward and say, why didn't the government ask for emails? Why didn't they ask for phone records? They can't say, why didn't you talk to this person or that person? Because that is using the method of the government's investigation as a form of impeachment, and that is not appropriate in the Second Circuit. Now, the defense countered and said, we're looking to ask these questions not to attack the way that they approached their investigation, but to show how old the case is. And the judge saw through that. She said, no, you can ask them what period of time they ended up checking. You don't need to try impeaching through that method, which is inappropriate in the Second Circuit. And as soon as Christian Everdell heard this, he said, well, my case just got a lot shorter. So that's part of your answer right there.
Boom. Very good explanation there. That's Joe Nierman. Good logic over there on YouTube. His link is down in the description. Good guy. And we had a long talk about a lot of this over on Viva's stream. I think that was on Wednesday this week. So if you missed that and you're looking for more analysis, certainly go check that out down over at Viva's stream. And so Joe gave us a very good breakdown of what's happening, right? If the judge is not going to allow you to go down a certain line of questioning, well, that's it. I mean, that's it. There's nothing else. There's no reason to call that witness. You're kind of cut off from that. And so a big part of this that we talked about previously, and like this is a big point. A lot of people, I think, are kind of glossing over this issue, but there's an allegation here that a prosecutor was emailing another lawyer for the attorney for Jane and sort of encouraging him to convince her to change her story. It's like a big deal. A prosecutor sending an email to that. The defense, Ghislaine Maxwell's defense, say that we've got this. We have records that this happened. They know the name of the guy. It's U.S. Attorney Ross Miller. We talked about this. It's in Jeff Paleyuka. The G is silent like lasagna. It's in their motion. It's in their disclosure. And they wanted to bring in an expert witness, basically the guy who wrote the book on prosecutorial misconduct. Not like he did all of it, but he analyzed it. He wrote the book on it. Wants to come out and say that what they did was problematic. That is a pretty big detail in a case. If there's something to appeal, that's one of them. One of your strongest victims, Jane, is potentially somebody who changed her story at the behest of the prosecution because the prosecution was communicating with her civil lawyer in a different situation. Whoa. And so that they're not going to get into any of that. And so Christian Everdell comes out and says, yeah, it looks like my case just kind of closed up pretty quickly. And it did. We had 2 days of defense case in chief. That's all that we got. Before we jump into the testimony today from law enforcement officers in Ghislaine Maxwell trial day 12, we do have to take a look at a government letter. Went into the court on December 17th, the same day that the government and the defense both concluded both cases in chief. They send a letter over to Judge Nathan, and we're going to get a couple different law enforcement individuals who come out very briefly today during trial. Government prosecutors send a letter. They say, Judge, we've talked to the defense. They're expected to call law enforcement agents in here today. Normally, we're only allowed to call them. They're calling them. We've talked to them, and we understand that the defense intends to ask questions of at least one law enforcement witness beyond those questions that elicit prior inconsistent statements. So see those again? In particular, they say, in advance of the agent's testimony, the government writes about the boundaries, about what is in scope and what is not in scope. Court already issued a ruling on November 1st that the government will object to any questions about the failure to utilize some of the particular techniques and training. And so this is a little bit more about what Joe Nierman in the prior segment talked about. They don't want these people to be able to comment on the length of the investigation, the techniques used, or any of those other variables. They want the government is notifying the court that this is forthcoming. And so the first witness that we get here, who is a government law enforcement official, this is Jason Richards. He's a special agent. And like all good FBI agents, especially the special ones, he's got two first names. We've got Judge Nathan, starting off the day, says, who's the first defense here, who's the first witness today, defense? Maxwell's lawyer, Paliuka, stands up and says, we got Special Agent Jason Richards. And again, I made this comment yesterday. It's a little bit unusual when a defendant, somebody who is being charged with crimes, calls in law enforcement officials to their case to testify on their behalf. And they've done several, they're doing this with several different individuals. And what I mean is active agents. My understanding is this guy is still an active agent, right? A lot of the defense will call former agents, former expert witnesses and things like this, but not this guy. All right, so he comes in. Judge Nathan calls the case. All rise. Jury stands up. They're 10:30 a.m. now. They're an hour late, as usual. Paliuka starts off. All right, Mr. Special Agent, where are you from? Where are you based? He says, well, Miami. Before that, Palm Beach. Paliuka says, perfect. Palm Beach is exactly what I want to talk about. Let's go back to 2006. What were you doing back then? Richard says, well, I was in unit PV2. Oh, what did the PV2 unit do there? Richard says, we investigated Epstein. Paliuka says, oh, yeah, I know. And back when that happened in Palm Beach, I got to ask, did you interview Carolyn? Don't say her name. Carolyn. That one, the one that we have all anonymized. Agent Richard says, I did. Paliuka says, do you recall when you were talking to Caroline, you recall saying that she obtained Epstein's number from a phone book and that Epstein returned her call? Richard says, if that's what's in the 302 report, he's totally not cooperating. Like, I don't know. If that's what's in the report, it's in the report. So, as I said, you're calling law enforcement agents to defend a defendant, or calling them as a witness in the defense of a defendant, not necessarily that they want to be there defending a defendant, but they're being used to defend a defendant. And so he gets a little bit snarky with it. Jeff Paliuka says, all right. So when you were back in Palm Beach in 2006, and you were investigating all of this, and you interviewed Carolyn, and you talked to Carolyn, did she tell you that she had a phone book and in there was a phone number, and she called and Epstein called her back? He goes, is it in the report? If it's in the report, then that's what it is. That's what I said. Did you read it? Paliuka says, no further questions. Because guess what? It is in the report. So he doesn't care. So he says, yeah, there you go. It is in the report. So probably, get that admitted as an exhibit. Got exactly what he needs out of him. Even though he was a little bit grumpy with him, no further questions. Cross-examination comes out and boom, it's done. Prosecutor says, you show your 302s to those you speak to? Richard says, no, I don't. So do you see what's happening here? What's in this 302 report is very useful to the defense. It's saying that Carolyn obtained Epstein's number from a phone book and that Epstein returned her call. Kind of sounds like Carolyn sought out Epstein, not like Epstein was grooming her and, creating this whole scheme and putting her through this. No, she got Epstein's number from a phone book. She called him and he called her back. Okay. He said it's in the report. The defense says that's great. He's not a grooming, whatever. And he just called her back. That's all he did. And so the prosecutor says, well, look, I know you wrote this. Did you show that to Carolyn? Like, did she approve that 302 report? Did she give you the thumbs up on that? Did you show it to her at all? He says, no, I didn't. There you go. Next question. Amanda Young, next special agent, comes out. Maxwell's lawyer, don't know who it is, might be Menninger, we'll see. Agent Young. Was your partner back then Detective Burns? Young says, yeah. And we both checked those 302, those summaries. We both read the summaries. And you just heard Miss Comey's question to Agent Richards. Didn't you? She says, yeah. And you heard him say that the 302s, they're not actually transcripts, right? They're not. That's because they're summaries, aren't they? That's right. So it's your interpretation. Okay, yeah. Maxwell's lawyer continues, says, and you, when you were completing these 302s, you're the person who actually interviewed Annie Farmer, didn't you? Yeah, I did. And you talked to her about the boots, right? The boots that Laura Menninger admitted into evidence as exhibits. Special Agent Young says, yeah, I did. Yeah, the boots, we got those boots. Law enforcement obtained those this year. I don't remember which month, but definitely this year. We got them. Maxwell's lawyer says, okay, well, I've got something else I'd like to show you here, Special Agent. Why don't you go ahead and read this? Young picks it up, starts reading. It says, quote, in the beginning, Jane would be with her mother and brothers at the Epstein house, end quote. Menninger then chimes in and says, all right, thank you. I want you to turn to page 7. You wrote, Jane did not recall specific abuse that may have occurred in New Mexico. Didn't you? So back when you wrote this in your 302, can you read this for me? In the beginning, she says, Jane would be with her mother and brother at the Epstein house. Okay, thank you. Flip it over to page 7. Now it says here, let me read this for you. It says you wrote, Jane did not recall specific abuse that may have occurred in New Mexico. You wrote that, right? Yes, I did. Thank you. Maxwell's lawyer says, just to emphasize, the boots, those were discussed recently, right? Yes, they were. The boots, which have been admitted as evidence in this case. They're coming back in. Cross-examination comes out. Might be Comey. All right, Miss Young, you're a special agent now. You're on boot duty. What'd you do before that? She says, well, I actually interviewed children about child abuse. Hard pause right there. They walk up to the judge's bench. There's a sidebar. We watch Amanda Young, the special agent, just sitting there in the plexiglass. She's wearing a blue shirt, a little dark, black jacket, which coincidentally happens to look exactly like that FBI agent. Dark blue shirt, black jacket that I picked off of Google Images. Nice. Judge Nathan says, all right, jurors, disregard that statement about Agent Young's previous job interviewing children. Okay, we're not going to be talking about any of that. It's not relevant. So prosecutor still continues. Talking about Jane, she says, did Jane need more than one meeting to say what happened? Maxwell's lawyers scream, objection, beyond the scope. What does that mean? It means that during the direct exam, they didn't ask her about any of that. When Maxwell's lawyers were asking Amanda Young about her interviews, or I should be more clear, they didn't ask about interviews. They asked about one interview, that one interview. And now the prosecution wants to ask about all the other interviews. Well, they didn't ask about that. So how can they cross-examine them about something that they didn't ask about? It's not a free-for-all. You don't just get to come in there and just talk about whatever the heck you want. It's got to be within the scope of what came out on the direct exam. So the defense was very careful with this. They asked her about one interview and one interview only. And as soon as the prosecution went off into the other interviews, objection beyond the scope. Prosecutor says, well, I'm going to try this another way then. That's probably true. It probably is beyond the scope. Let me just try it again. Okay, who was there for the interviews? Boom, Maxwell's lawyer again, objection. Beyond the scope. I didn't ask about that. I didn't talk about who was there. I didn't say anything about that. There's a short redirect that comes through. Manager comes back out and says, okay, Miss Special Agent Young, you know these notes that I was just reading you from, the same one that you said that Jane didn't report any abuse, you know those notes? You used these notes with the grand jury, didn't you? When you signed off on that indictment. Young says, yes, some of them. Manager says, did you show her the 302s? I think she's referring to Jane. And Young says, no, it's not ethical. It's not appropriate. And Manager says, and when you have these conversations with these people, like you're sitting there talking to Jane, right? You did the interview with her. You wrote down that she didn't have any recollection of abuse back there in New Mexico. You don't record these interviews. She says, no, only the people in custody. So only the people that we arrest. We don't record the victims. We don't record the witnesses. Only those in custody, not the other people. And you also don't show them the 302s? She says, no, it's not ethical. It's not appropriate. Manager continues, are you familiar with how the Department of Justice obtains evidence and what their protocols are? Prosecutor screams out, objection, Judge Nathan, overruled. Manager says, I've got a document. I can show it. Okay, and so it sounds like what we have here is a little bit of sort of impeachment going on here. You don't record them. You don't record these witnesses. You don't. And then what she's doing is she's saying, let me show you the actual protocols. You say you don't do things a certain way. Let me show you the protocols that say something different. I've got a document. I can show you. Here's what it says about recording victims. Here's what it says about recording witnesses. Did you do that? Oh, weird. Weird if you didn't do any of those things. Wonder what that might mean. Don't know. We get a nice summation of this over from the New York Times. We know that this was Jane. Remember Jane? She was the first one that we heard from. Crying on the stand, very upset. There was an allegation back then that came out of Jane specifically. Jane said during her direct exam that Maxwell and Epstein would summon people up into that room and there would be a group activity going on in there. Wild group activities. Defense lawyers had asked Jane back during cross-examination. So remember, rewind back to this. Jane's the first victim who comes out here. She tells the whole story. Where'd they take you? What'd they do? Where'd they buy you? What, all of these things. She says they'd walk into a room. One thing would turn into another. Next thing you know, there's 5 people in there all just going at each other. And what happens here is she's asked by the defense, okay, you keep talking about these little events that take place in the Epstein mansion. Who was there? Who was with you during all of these things? And she rattles off a bunch of names. She says, oh, Sophie was there, obviously. Eva was there. She was crazy. Emmy was there. Emmy, ooh. Michelle and Kelly. They were all there for all of these activities. They all participated. And in fact, Jane says, if you call them, they're going to be able to corroborate that. Yeah, they can remember that. Nobody is going to forget those affairs. And so that came out during Jane's testimony. And so what did the defense do? Easy. They just said, easy. We can do this. No problem. So you say that Sophie, Eva, Emmy, Michelle, and Kelly, they were all there. Perfect. Well, we're just going to go find them and we're going to ask them about this. Since you said that they were there, we're just going to go round them up and ask them about these little events because certainly they would remember these, right? This is what the scene looked like. This was Eva Andersson-Dubin. Here is a little bit about her. Over from Wikipedia, she is now a Swedish physician. She's a doctor. She's the founder of the Dubin Breast Center. and the Cancer Institute in New York City. She's married to a hedge fund billionaire. Guy's name is Glenn Dubin, so I think she took that last name there. She worked as a model, and she won the Miss Sweden contest back in 1980. She was the fourth runner-up of Miss Universe. She was Miss Sweden in 1980. Worked with Ford Models Agency. Let's see. They donated $19 million since 2011. They processed a number of different patients. Let's see. She was a model. Eileen Ford, there was a model agency, said she was excellent. Oh, this is funny. Yeah, Eva Anderson, she was entered into the Miss Sweden contest without her knowledge, and then she won. It's nice. It's very nice when you can just be entered into a contest without even knowing about it, and you just win. Here's a little video I found on YouTube of Eva.
Eva Andersson, Sweden.
And Miss Sweden, Eva Andersson. Followed by two Scandinavian beauties. Number 2 is Miss Sweden. And now, Miss Sweden.
Agnes is a brown-eyed brunette. She's 18 years old, she weighs 118 pounds, and she's 5 feet 8 inches tall.
All right. So, you know, I think that was a little bit before my time because I was born in 1985, and I think that was like back in the 1980s, right? She won back in the 1980s. Were they rating women like on the screen back then? Did you see that like 7.65? Like they were actually rating these women on screen? Woo, man, you know? All right, that's interesting. You know, interesting things. Times have changed. So a little bit about this woman's personal life. You can see here that she did in fact date Jeffrey Epstein. Uh-oh. And guess what else, folks? Even after Epstein was in jail, after he pled guilty in 2008, she still, quote, continued to socialize with him. See that? Eva Anderson even continued to socialize with Epstein after his time in jail, after he had already been convicted for procuring prostitution, all right? Back in the early 1990s, she was seen by her future husband, Glenn Dubin, for the first time via a modeling photo in the page 6 section. And I guess when you're a billionaire, like Epstein or like maybe Glenn Dubin, you just see somebody on New York Post page 6 or on a stage like that and you say 7.6. Yeah, that's a good one. I'll take that. How much? And they just insane. I guess I don't know how that works. Anyways, so this woman, you can see here, now happily married and has the entire Epstein saga beyond her. Well, except for today when she was hauled into court to testify for this thing. Looks like a very nice family. Now, if you recall, if you've been with this channel for some time, you know that we've looked at this photograph before. Why is that? Well, here you can see Eva Andersson-Dubin. You can see Mr. Glenn Dubin in the middle there. And then you can see their nice, lovely daughter there on the right. Who is that daughter? Oh, that was Jeffrey Epstein's prospective fiance. What? Yeah, that's right. He wanted to marry the daughter of his ex-girlfriend, okay? This guy, Jeffrey Epstein, wanted to marry this girl. Okay, let's back this up for a minute in case we missed this. He had already dated mom for a long time back in the 1980s. Already dated mom. Jeffrey Epstein, according to this article, once wanted to marry an ex-girlfriend's teenage daughter who called him Uncle Jeff, according to the report. Okay, Epstein openly declared his plans to wed Selena Dubin. That's this gal right here. Remember, he already dated mom. He's the daughter of former Miss Sweden, Eva Andersson, who had dated Epstein for 11 years until the early 90s. The pair had developed, quote, an especially close relationship when Selena was just 12, with, quote, Uncle Jeff at times having substituted for her dad, the Palm Beach Post has previously reported, citing a profile made by Epstein's lawyers. Epstein was telling associates in 2014 that if he ever married, it would be to Selena, who was 19 at the time. Sources told Business Insider. Okay, now listen to this. Now, this article came out from December 18, 2019. All right, 10:45 a.m., just over 2 years, just under 2 years ago tomorrow. How about that? 2 years ago tomorrow, this article came out. And you notice it here in this article, they quote this Uncle Jeff thing here. Weird Uncle Jeff. Weird Uncle Jeff comes over and he's just going to substitute. He dated mommy for 11 years. Now he wants to marry daughter. Glenn, the multi-billionaire, apparently was okay with Uncle Jeff being substituted for her dad. What the effing F is what is going on? I have no idea what the heck is happening right now. What? What? Okay, so Uncle Jeff comes over, hangs out with mom, dated for 11 years. She's married to a billionaire, wants to marry the daughter. She's only 19 back in 2014. And the whole thing, I guess, is just okay. So that's who comes in and testifies. So now she's up here. Eva Dubin is in the house. Maxwell's lawyer calls her up into the stand and says, "Can you tell me your name?" She says, "Yes, I'm Eva Andersson. And I go by Eva Andersson-Dubin. I live in New York City. I'm 60 years old. Thank you." Maxwell's team says, "And you're married to Glenn Dubin, right?" Eva says, "Yeah. 28 years happily married. 3 kids, 27, 25, and 20. How about the genders of those kids?" Eva says, "Female, male, female. Wonder which one Selena is." Maxwell's lawyer says, "And what is Mr. Dubin for employment?" She says he's self-employed because he's a billionaire. She says, "I was previously employed as a medical doctor." "Oh, a medical doctor. Tell me more about that. You must be very credentialed. You must be somebody who's very reliable and credible. Tell me more, doctor." Eva says, "I went to medical school. I went back in Stockholm, and then I went to UCLA, and after that, I went to Lenox Hill. It was a hospital in New York City where I saved many people's lives." Well, that's great. Thanks for being here today. And Eva, can you tell us a little bit more about Epstein? How did you know him? Eva says, "Well, we dated." "Oh, how long was that for?" She says, "Oh, off and on, 1983 to 1991. You know how these things are. You break up, you get back together. You break up again. We all know how that goes." It continues. Maxwell's lawyer says, "And that's a long time from 1983 to 1991. My goodness. Throughout that entirety, let me ask you, did you ever witness any particular contact between Mr. Epstein and U.S. Prosecutor Allison Moe is so angry she stands up and she screams, 'Objection, Judge!'" Can't ask that. Judge says, hold up. You can't ask about, did you ever witness any contact between Epstein and somebody else? They go up there, they have a sidebar. They come back. That question doesn't sound like it comes back in. Maxwell's lawyer continues. "All right, Eva. I want to show you some photographs here under seal. Is one person Mr. Epstein and the other one of your children?" Eva says, "Yeah. It's the 20-year-old. I've never seen this picture before." Scary thought for a mother. Maxwell's lawyer says, "All right, well, let me ask you about these flight records then, Eva." And Eva says, "Not much, because it's all redacted. Don't get to see any of this stuff." Remember the flight records. We've heard a lot about these from Visovsky. We've heard about these from the other pilot. His name escapes me, but he is on the mind map. Going through the flight logs, talking about people being on there and off of there. We know that Jane identified somebody named Eva as part of these group activities that took place all over the world. And Ava's now looking at the flight logs. Judge Nathan gives the jurors a break. We're still in the mid-morning here. But remember, we started late. There were multiple objections from the government talking about, publishing the flight logs. And the judge sustains those objections doesn't allow certain documents to come in. So testimony continues. They come back after a short break. We still have Laura Menninger, and she's still doing the direct exam. Remember, this is the defense case in chief. And so we're listening to Eva Andersson-Dubin, who was Epstein's former ex for 11 years, talking about these flight logs. Menninger says to Eva, I want you to look at this exhibit. It's GX662R. These are the redacted flight logs of Dave Roberts. Can you see this, Dr. Dubin? Judge Nathan says, can we make sure that that's redacted? And if it is, then we can publish it. And remember that we have seen these. These were the ones that had huge blacked out, just in whole swaths of this page were it was just basically a big black page. On the screen, then we see the flight. It says JE. It says Eva Anderson. And it also says Miss Frances Hardeen. So you see those three names. Eva, do you remember Frances Hardeen? Eva says, well, I remember Frances. I didn't know her last name, but yeah, I definitely remember Frances. And Menninger says, and you knew that Epstein was dating her? And Eva says, yeah, I did. Yeah. Epstein and Frances and Jeffrey and Frances, two little lovebirds. Eva, I want to show you another exhibit. This is GX12. And now, only for the witness in the court, the unredacted exhibit. This has been sealed, so of course nothing gets shown on the screen. Can't see any of it. Do you recognize anybody in this? Eva says, yeah, I recognize Sophie Biddle. Who's Sophie Biddle? Oh, she's a massage therapist. Yeah, and I see my husband's name. So now I think we can glean what we're looking at. Might be a log. It might be a record, an invoice. She's looking at something that has her husband's name on it. We see a massage therapist named Sophie Biddle. Was Sophie one of the names that Jane talked about being in those group activities? Maybe. Maxwell's lawyer continues. All right, don't say the name. Don't say it. Do you see that name on this list? She says yes. That name is Jane's real name. Jane's real name is on the same list as Sophie Biddle, a massage therapist, and her husband's name. So it must be just a pretty benign list. Jane's name is on there, and Eva can see it. Maxwell's lawyer says, have you ever been in a group activity with Jane? And Eva says, I have not. Names on the list, massage, the whole thing. I have never participated. We get a different interpretation of this from the New York Times. And they're telling us that this is directly contradicting Jane's testimony. Remember, Jane, back then, said she was abused by Maxwell and Epstein. This all took place when she was 14 or 15. She said that there would be this thing that would happen where they would summon them up into this room, up into Epstein's bedroom, and it would turn into this big group affair. And then while cross-examining Jane, the defense said, who else was there? Jane said, when she was testifying, when Laura was asking her questions, that Eva joined in on the party. But Eva here says, I never did. Eva, in fact, says, I don't recall ever meeting this person. So Jane is saying that Eva was a part of these affairs. Ava's saying, I don't even know who you're talking about. And I was never a part of any of that. Now, something else came out. Remember when we were talking about Eva and her daughter that Epstein wanted to marry? Sick. Epstein's one-time, a long-time girlfriend was questioned about this. And she said that they remained close. In fact, they viewed him as someone akin to an uncle. She said that today. After she split in the 90s, we were close, and he was kind of like an uncle. In fact, they called him Uncle F, she said of her kids' relationship. So even to this day, that same article that we read from back in 2019, 2 years ago, 2 years to the day, still calling Epstein Uncle F. Now, she comes out and says, I never witnessed anything, never saw any abuse from a child, nothing from 1994, nothing to 2004, nothing listed in the Maxwell indictment at all. Good old Uncle F. Or Uncle Jeff. Cross-examination now happens. Allison Moe, government prosecutor, comes out. Pretty simple. Hey, Eva, quick question. Are you the only Eva in the whole wide world? Maxwell's lawyers scream, objection, that's irrelevant. What kind of a ridiculous question is that? And Judge Nathan says, no, that's overruled. You can ask that. And so that gets allowed to be answered, right? And so what Allison Moe is doing, with a little bit of spice, I got to say, Eva, yeah. Jane said that there was somebody named Eva who was a part of these group activities. You said that wasn't you. Do you think, and this could be crazy, do you think that there could be other Evas out there that maybe Jane was talking about that wasn't you? And the defense says, you can't ask that question. That's irrelevant. And so the judge overrules that. And Eva says, no, I'm sure there's other Evas out there because it's a pretty common name. And so Moe then continues. Did you ever discuss with Epstein his relationship with Maxwell? Objection, hearsay. That's an out-of-court statement. You can't talk about that. Judge sustains that. So that question goes bye-bye. Moe, though, continues and asks her about her memory a little bit. This is interesting. Moe says, Eva, look, I'm sorry to do this. Respectfully, I got to ask you, though, you have any issues with your memory? She says, I can't remember things from last month. I mean, honestly. Maxwell's lawyer says, hey, look, this doesn't need to be discussed, okay? All that got out in front of the jury. Eva can't remember anything from last month. So prosecutor Moe says, all right, that's it. I got nothing further. New York Times gave us a little bit more detail here. Eva said specifically, quote, it's very hard for me to remember anything far back, and sometimes I can't remember things from last month. My family notices it. I notice it. In fact, it's been an issue. So, what do you take from that? Here, you bring in a witness who is supposed to be testifying about what she remembers. Guess what? She doesn't remember anything about these group activity affairs. She doesn't remember Jane. She doesn't remember any of those introductions, apparently. But she also can't remember what happened last month sometimes. So, good or bad? Remember, we talked about this. The defense said it. Memory, money, and manipulation. We have another memory. So that was Eva Andersson-Dubin, Epstein's former girlfriend, testifying. Ghislaine Maxwell trial day 12. Our next witness is another person named Michelle, who also didn't participate in any group activities, so she says. Laura Menninger called her to the stand. Michelle Healy, a former Epstein employee, somebody who worked at the J. Epstein & Co. organization, she's called up to the stand. Ms. Healy, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Well, I'm 47 years old. I live in Dallas. What kind of work do you do? Well, I'm a housewife. Oh, that's nice. Well, what does your husband do? Well, he's an architect. And how about family? You have any family anywhere? Well, my sister, Shannon, she's in Albuquerque. And I grew up in Long Island. I've been living in New York for a long time. It's 1974, I'd say, back all the way up to 1999. Menninger says, thank you. If we rewind the clock back to 1996, where did you work back then? J. Epstein and Company. Oh, thank you. And when you were working for Epstein, what kind of work did you do? She says, well, I went to Zorro Ranch. Oh, what brought you there? Well, my sister had a job there, and I was working there, and so I went to go there and work with my sister. Menninger says, and when you were there at the Zorro Ranch, were you ever involved in any group activities with Jane? And Healy says, absolutely not. absolutely not. Not just no, I mean absolutely not. Which, makes it that much more true. We get cross-examination here. So Mo comes back out. No, it's Comey's back out. And asks the same question. Michelle. Jane said that there was a Michelle participating in all of these affairs. You say you did not participate in those. That's right. Absolutely not. I did not do any of that. Okay. Well, they say Jane said that there was a Michelle there. Could it be possible that there are other Michelles in the world? Or are you the only Michelle in the world? And Michelle says, well, I certainly hope not. And Mo says, and you never flew on Epstein's plane either? Healy says no. And that's it. Nothing further from Healy. And so now we're wrapping this puppy up. And we're trying to figure out what's happening with these next witnesses. Are we going to be done? Yes or no? Both attorneys are in front of the court talking with Judge Nathan. Judge says, listen, I always say, I have so many bridges to cross, I only cross the bridge that is in front of me. Maxwell's lawyer is still pushing to have this Nag's Head pub witness come in and testify. We talked about him at the start of the show. Maxwell says, listen, all I want to do is put in the property records about these property that we're talking about. These are self-authenticating. Don't even need to have any conversation about it. They authenticate themselves. Don't need a witness. And so Judge Nathan says, well, listen, what do we have after lunch? We're going to let the jurors go for a break. Maxwell's attorney says, well, we're going to get together and we're going to work on the stipulations. We're going to work on these factual agreements that we can come to and get admitted in front of the juries. So Judge Nathan says, whoa, are you saying that there's no more defense witnesses? I'm going to be spending my remaining lunch hour then reviewing Kelly. It's probably a different case. Prosecutor says, if not Monday morning, it's too late. Judge says it's going to be a long break for the jury. Try to confer. And guess what? That happened. They were out basically all day until 2:25. Comes and goes. Inner City Press is there. Joe Nierman is there. Addy Ads on Twitter is there. All of the good journalists who are covering this case are sitting there wondering what the heck is going on out there. And it turns out the attorneys are conferring. Inner City Press says jury's still out, 2:25 p.m. Nothing's going on. Jury's still not back. It's 2:42 p.m. This is a very long lunch that's taking place. But now inside the courtroom, Judge Nathan is saying, that's it. Clock is ticking. We're out of time. If you don't have anything to present, I'm going to be doing the allocution. I'm going to be asking Ghislaine Maxwell if she intends to testify. We're getting to a close on this thing. We remember what Judge Allison Nathan's rule was at the start of this. You get your next witness lined up or you rest. We're not playing this game. So Maxwell now has to make a decision. Do we testify? Do I talk? Do I take the stand and tell my side of the story? Yes or no? Maxwell is talking at length with her lawyer, Bobby Sternheim, and everybody else. You can see what that looked like in court today. You can see on the left, we have Bobby Sternheim in a purple mask leaning over. Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, in the center, getting advice from 4 different sides. Looks like Laura Menninger on the top right. Very likely Jeff Paliuka there in the center, and Christian Everdell crouching down on the floor, having conversations with Ghislaine about what to do. Testify, yes or no. And they make a decision. Trial continues. Judge Nathan has now returned, and Prosecutor Comey says, we've reached some stipulations. While they're talking, the judge says, how long do we have to read these stipulations? Comey says, it's about 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, there's kind of a lot of these things. And what are we talking about? Menninger wants them to take judicial notice of a 1996 case. This had to do with a leased building to Epstein. And so they're going to talk about that, getting some documents in, admitted. Judge Nathan comes out with another ruling and says specifically, I'm going to be sustaining an objection given the posture of that case, so that it sounds like that document is not going to be coming in. There was an old deposition of Epstein. It sounds like in the old deposition, the government's goal wasn't what it is here. Yeah, so they're going to keep this excluded. Sounds like that was from a different civil case. The defense wanted to get that in. Judge is saying no. Now, Maxwell's lawyer is not happy about this, it sounds like. It sounds like Menninger is getting a little bit agitated. It says, Judge, listen, Jane said that Epstein was living at 9 East 71st Street back in 1994. But this case says different. I'm trying to show you we have another case from a civil lawsuit that says something differently. Okay, your witness, Jane, who we've already shown, really can't remember much of anything, is highly problematic. Her testimony doesn't match what we know to be true that came out of a different lawsuit. Judge Nathan says, listen, I have already ruled on this, okay? It is not coming in. And I heard no arrest warrant for Kelly. No need to arrest Kelly Bolino. Okay, so it's not coming in. And I heard no arrest warrant for Kelly. So Kelly Bolino would have been that other person that they issued a subpoena for. So that third person that they're alleging participated in those group activities is also not coming in. And the government says, we're done too. We don't have any rebuttal case. Yeah, we got everything we needed in our 7.5 or 8 days of testimony. So that's all that we've got. So what happens next? The allocution. Ghislaine Maxwell speaks. Judge Nathan says, Miss Maxwell, please rise. Ms. Maxwell, the decision to testify or not is your decision. Nobody can force you to testify. Nobody can force you not to testify. Nobody can promise you anything to get you to testify. You have a right to tell your side of the story. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. Do you understand these rights? Do you understand what happens if you give up these rights? Do you wish to give up these rights? Maxwell says, Your Honor, the government had not proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt, so there is no need for me to testify. Here's what that looked like as she stood up and received the allocution. You can see her there with her multi-million-dollar defense team. The New York Post gives us a different read here. This is Ben Feuerherd, who's also boots on the ground doing great work. She said in court she's not going to testify. She told Judge Allison Nathan, Your Honor, the government has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Nathan had asked her, I want to make sure you understand this. You have the right to testify. The decision not to do it is your decision. Even if your attorneys say you should not testify, you have the right to do that, right? And you really don't want to do this? Maxwell says, Your Honor, that is correct. New stipulations are now coming in. We've got Laura Menninger and some of the other attorneys are reading stuff into the record. These are agreements. A stipulation is an agreement between both parties, both sides, the defense and the prosecution. One stipulation, one agreement is that the boots were seized by the FBI on June 29th. Okay, they're agreeing that date. Those boots, they came from the FBI in June of this year, like a couple months ago. So they needed to determine that and agree upon that, and they've done that. Also, when The Lion King opened, they agreed on that. Remember, that's a big issue. We'll take a look at that. And they also agreed that Dominic Hippolyte would testify that the Palm Beach school maintains records, right? And we knew that. We actually heard from that witness a little bit. Now, remember that Lion King issue we talked about? Remember Jane said that Jane said that she went and saw The Lion King, the Broadway play. Remember when that happened? We looked this up here. Yeah, it looks like when it was on Broadway, Wikipedia says this took place in 1997. And so, of course, Jane was born in a certain year. And so if she went and saw this, The Lion King, the movie, well, this came out in 1994. And if she went and saw that on an opening day or something, when it was still in theaters or when we would have to go into a location to see it, she would obviously be younger in 1994 than she would be in 1997. But from her conversations with her attorney, she was pretty dang adamant that she saw the play, not the movie, because she said she was sitting in the pews in the play, looking up at the actress, and Epstein was saying, "I know that lady," or whatever. She came to my Christmas party. So there's a big discrepancy there. And they just agreed about that. And so the jurors are going to be playing with that. That's another tool that they're going to have in their toolbox to play around with as they're going through their deliberations. We're getting close to the finish of this day. We've got now inner city press reporting that the boots were seized. And as soon as those stipulations are over, guess what happens? The defense rests. Not even 2 full days of a defense, maybe a day and a half. A late start and an early close. Prosecutor also stands up. The U.S. has no further case. They're done too. So Judge Nathan stands and says, "Jurors, you're going to hear closing arguments, and then I'm going to instruct you on the law, and you're going to begin deliberations. Monday, I asked that we start at 9 a.m. It's possible we're going to be going till 6. Don't forget, continue to follow my instructions. No communications with each other or anyone else about the case. Keep an open mind until summations and my instructions, and be cautious out there. I want to see everybody back here Monday at 9 a.m. sharp. All rise." And the jurors are on their way. They're out. It's Friday. They're home. They're getting a cocktail. They're getting some Grubhub. They're going and watching Netflix, and they're chilling. And they have a tall order for them when they return back on Monday, because we're going to hear closing arguments. Then we're going to turn it over to the jurors for a verdict. And a lot of people are sort of calculating the timelines on this thing. Could we get a verdict before Christmas? Could there be a Christmas miracle for somebody in this country? What about for Ghislaine Maxwell? You know, there's lists of naughty or nice. What happens if Ghislaine Maxwell gets a Christmas miracle and she's exonerated? What if on Christmas morning you wake up and Ghislaine Maxwell's a free woman? Well, somebody would be celebrating 2 things that day. Not only would Ghislaine Maxwell be celebrating a Christmas miracle, but Ghislaine Maxwell would also be celebrating her birthday, because her birthday is on December 25th, 1961. So this Christmas season, when everybody's sitting around the Christmas tree, singing Christmas carols, you might also want to throw in a happy birthday, Ghislaine, while you're there with your family. I'm going to vomit my guts up. This case is the most insane case. Like, what is happening? Why is all of this? Oh, I saw it and I was just like, the timing, and then it's her birthday. The whole thing is just, it'll make you go crazy. All right. So, you don't actually have to sing her happy birthday. Okay. I was joking about that. Let's see what you have to say about this case and more from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we had some super chats come in. Shout out to our friends on YouTube. Dryan is saying, "How are folks getting info from the trial? It's not on video." Well, we're reading it from Twitter, Dryan. Yeah, you're right. It's not on video. It's not on audio. It's federal court. So a lot of this stuff is prohibited from even being rebroadcast. Even when you have those call-in phone numbers and you can actually call in and listen, the federal courts are typically not allowing you to rebroadcast anything. So you might be able to call in and listen in, which you cannot do for Ghislaine Maxwell. The only thing you can do for Ghislaine is actually go down to the courthouse. Guys like Joe Nierman, Good Logic here on YouTube, guys like Addy Ads, guys like Adam Classfield, a lot of other journalists are there. But Inner City Press is there, of course. We talk about him, but he's tweeting from the courthouse. I mean, he's there, watching it on the monitors and actually tweeting that out. So yes, thank you for that. That was from Dryan. We have another one from Mark Owens, says support. Thank you, Mark Owens. I appreciate that. No question there. Jay says wrapped up before Christmas and the public will move on. Sick, sad, and rife with corruption. Thanks for all your work. Right in the middle of Christmas. You get a verdict right in the middle of Christmas. Nobody cares. Everybody's home with their families. It couldn't have timed it more perfectly. All right. Rise Jones says, an idea. You cultivate a few high-profile people over 30 years, and anytime you abuse a child, you make sure they only use the name of the clean ones. I'm not sure I'm following that. But, okay, I think I see what you're saying. Yes, I see what you're saying. That's really a horrific thought. Thank you for sharing that. Like this, I see what you're saying. You're sort of like, it's like swapping a license plate on a car. Awful thought. Oh my God, this is awesome. Says, can we see the less redacted flight logs now? Not from this court. No, we're not going to see any of that. It's all sealed. Not going to see any of it. Now, a lot of this stuff has been floating around the internet. And so if you dig into it, you can find documents, whether you believe them to be authentic or not. That's up to you. They certainly would not be authenticated in the court of law, but they might actually be authentic. Not legally authentic, but actually authentic. Just use your judgment, of course. Anisha with no question, but a nice super chat. Thank you, Anisha. I appreciate you supporting the show. And let's jump over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com where, let's take a look at the polls first, shall we? So the poll here, we can see now we've got 33% saying split verdict. We have 12% saying it's a hung jury. Let me drop that poll link one more time if you're there. We'll drop that in there. I think you've got that. Yeah. Okay. So the poll is there again. We'll check it one more time before we wrap up, but you can see 12% hung jury, so not going to get a decision. 24%, so 32% say guilty on all counts. 20% say not guilty on all counts. 80-20 rigged versus not rigged on the trial. And then we have whether Epstein killed himself. We're at 62% say he was killed. Only 10% say that he actually killed himself. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, all right. So let's jump over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. See what kind of questions we've got here. I see a handful of them. We have, first one up is from former LEO. Says, nice curveball by the prosecution to shorten the trial from 6 weeks to 2 weeks with all the COVID travel problems. That could get a conviction overturned. That was from former LEO. Yeah, 6 weeks to about 2 weeks and a day and a half. Really, like 11 days of trial day, 12 days. But it was really like 11 because there was one of those days that was like a sick day. And we counted that as a day. So it was really like 11 days of trial. Insane. Kincaid says, Rob, is live chat down? Did I fever the ire of a cyber deity? I think it's working, Kincaid. You might have angered the ire of a cyber deity. I'm not sure about that. All right, we've got some more. Let's see. Falcon Hoof says, Rob, show the pie chart again. All right, here it is. So we've got verdict. We've got 36% split, 32% guilty all counts, 21% not guilty all counts, 9% no verdict. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty fair. Like between these three here, guilty, not guilty, and split. I mean, there's no real sort of clear majority there. Voted 102, which is not that much. Not that much. So this one has a lot more, 528, did Epstein kill himself? So go vote. If you haven't voted, vote it out. Vote it up. All right, so you can see actually them come in real time as people are voting. All right, and so we got some more questions from Watching the Watchers. Let's see. That was from Kincaid, our cyber deity question. Hopefully you didn't anger anybody too badly. Thunder7 says, prosecution, the defense, and the judge can go celebrate over the weekend. Mission accomplished. They got to throw out Trump's name, didn't question the real victims, never talked about any trafficking, kept the global elites like Clinton, Gates, Bezos, Branson, everybody else outside of trial. Corrupt, rigged, and an insult to the minors who have been abused. From Thunder7. I think a lot of people feel that way. Kincaid says, did not misconduct happen in the Floyd case? However, the judge's decision does seem to lend to a stronger appeal. It seems like some want this to vanish at all costs. After things calm down, couldn't the appeal be handled in a manner that considers Epstein's agreement out of court quietly? Well, I mean, The appeal will be public, so it sort of depends on how loud and aggressive the public is with whatever outcome that is. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to probably follow the same trajectory that the Bill Cosby case did. Remember, everybody, when he got convicted, everybody's like, yeah, finally, me too, hashtags all over Twitter. It's morning in America again. Bill Cosby's going to jail. Okay. So everybody forgot about it. Bill Cosby is, I was talking to somebody else about this. Bill Cosby's like free now, right? He's like out. What? They said what? And this is a person who knows a lot of things. Yeah, because they got the story that they wanted. The other story is not that interesting. So same thing could happen with Ghislaine. Okay, we get her convicted. What do you convict her on? Jane? Because it sounds like Annie Farmer and Kate were were not actually allowed to be victims here. So you're already sort of you already sort of 1-2. Daniel David says, I notice sometimes the live chat on Locals is hard to reach. Thank you for that feedback, Daniel. I didn't know that. I did have some issue. I was trying to live stream earlier this week and I had some problems with it. So hopefully that is not the same thing. But thank you for that question, Kincaid. We got a few more from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Another one from Kincaid says, Agent Young's report was cherry-picked like texts of old. We all know how that can go. I would imagine that it has to be frustrating when a judge refuses or doesn't see your point as a lawyer. Are there any modern examples of a judge's conduct being officially challenged? Oh, yeah. I mean, that happens all the time. Yeah, I mean, all the time, right? I mean, judges are people just like the rest of us. They make mistakes. Stuff goes up to a superior court, a higher level court. They get, you can't do that, and goes back down. Okay, sorry, I won't do that again. And so, all of that is sort of normal. And a lot of that can happen without a lot of animosity, like our law firm. We just had a case that we lost. We took it up on appeal. We won the appealable issue. It wasn't a dismissal of the case, but we do get to go back and do the trial again, right? So it's sort of like that because the judge's decision at a lower level was not correct. And so we get to do the whole thing over. So it's like that, so that judge, experienced a new issue. We experienced a new issue. The prosecution experienced a new issue, went a certain way. It wasn't really the right way. And so we get to kind of all go do it again because it was a new novel issue. But judges you can file a complaints against judges. There's, judicial codes of conduct and judicial canons that they have to follow. Yeah, they're highly regulated just like everybody else. Thunder 7 says, Rob, I've included a link, which you probably have. It's testimony from Dubin's butler, who stated that he met a 15-year-old Swedish girl at the Dubin home who was absolutely terrified and told him her passport had been taken by Maxwell and she was forced into activities at the island, and Eva Andersson-Dubin was a participant. Jufrey also testified in 2016 that Dubin was a part of it as well. Well, that sort of corroborates the Uncle Jeff thing, doesn't it? Oh, Uncle Jeff is just around and, just marry my daughter. All right, we have some more. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, is Uncle Jeff doing a Woody Allen movie? It's terrible. All right, a couple more before we wrap it up for the day. We've got Thunder 7 says, the marriage of Uncle Jeff to the daughter of Eva Dubin was a way to pass Epstein's vast fortune to the Dubins without paying the estate tax. It's about money, nothing else. Epstein only attracted to people younger than her. It's horrible. All right, we have another one from Jumpin' Jeff says, Maxwell is guilty, but in the state's effort to protect bad actors, the state proved nothing, just a big waste of time except for the judge who got promoted. Yeah, the state proved nothing except their ineptitude. Sounds about right there, Jumpin' Jeff. And I think, my friends, that was it for the day. Daniel David said, Locals chat's a little bit hard to reach. So, all right, I'll take a look at that, Daniel. Thank you for that. And then over on YouTube, Cher says, so will the issue of the Epstein Fund document go public sooner? It's a good question. Yeah, we really didn't get into much of that. Remember that when we talked about the mind map here, we had a couple issues. Let's take a quick look at the mind map since we have a little bit of time. Now, this is not up to date as of today. I'm going to update this. We'll have a final version of this come Monday because trial is done. But we had a couple outstanding issues, and this mind map, of course, is pinned up in the chat and it's also down in the description below. But we had a couple of these questions. The birth certificate stipulation, the black book, portions of that got admitted, so that's done. We had expert witness testimony that was pending. So a lot of this was, we can call this got denied, legal witness testimony. So like when I'm talking about expert witness, that would have been, and this was denied also because we didn't hear from these guys. Okay, so remember these two, the legal witness testimony was denied. They were going to bring in these lawyers from Robert Glassman was Jane's lawyer, and Scarola and Edwards represented two of the other victims here. And they didn't get called, right? So all of these legal witnesses, they didn't get called. Robert Kelso did not get called. We did not see John Lopez, Gerald Laporte, Jennifer Nasso was not called. Bennett Gershman was not called. This was the prosecutorial integrity guy. We didn't see him. Ryan Hall. I can't believe we didn't hear from Ryan Hall. This guy was supposed to be like a key witness. He interviewed somebody in this case for 6.5 hours. He wrote a 108-page detailed report. He based his review on documentary evidence, medical records, court files. He did a 6.5 interview. Didn't hear from him. Who did he talk to? No idea who he talked to, but we didn't hear from him. Park Dietz, one of the world-renowned experts in psychology, psychiatry, behavioral science, forensic psychiatry, nothing. Didn't hear from him. We heard from Loftus, but very briefly. And so we'll clean some of that up. But I mean, this whole thing has just been. Part of the reason we made this mind map is so I could put out 35 witnesses over here. I wanted 35 witnesses to fill. Look at this is blank. I'm very upset about this right now. I wanted to fill this out with all sorts of different nodes and different branches and trees. And we're not going to be able to do that because they rested their case. Ridiculous. But my friends, that is it for the show for the day. I want to thank you for being a part of the program throughout this entirety of the week. We've been spending a lot of time on Ghislaine Maxwell. We're almost done with this. I know that a lot of people, myself included, it's kind of a hard topic to just keep talking about all the time, but we're almost done. We've got closing arguments that are taking place on Monday. We're going to hand this off to the jury. And while the jury's deliberating, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about some other things. And then we'll move back into some of the other less gruesome cases. Probably not. They're all pretty bad that we talk about here. But at least we'll move on from this one, but we still need to get some closure on this. We've got a little bit of work left to do before we get to a final outcome. We've invested a lot of time in this. Some very, very high profile people are involved in this case. We've got Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein. We've got a number of victims, sort of this gigantic explosion of evil or criminality that happens. And so we're going to keep our eyes on this through the conclusion. And we want you to be here with us. So, my friends, that is it for the show. Everybody have a tremendous evening. Sleep. Nope. We've got some, I forgot. We've got some new supporters to welcome to our community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. How could I possibly forget that? Big welcomes to Falcone, U.S., New York. Welcome, Falcone. We also have, who joined up? We have Reen is here. We have not RWC110, Chuck David. We got Mark-On W is here. Shindog. Nosy, Texas Rosie, Tay's mom, Cookie Monster, AJ Darsha, Molly Pop Inc. We got Guitar Terry, Randy J, Westworld Equestrian Girl, Richie DC, Red Jersey is here, Nikki Dragon, Things and Stuff. We've got Donna 107, The Vez, Jimmy W, Big Brother Bites, Kimmy Cat 03, Kevin AZ, Antar 24, Queen of Tennessee is here, Rebby Lee, Music Box Lady, Bigry, Phantasmagloria, Black Cat Meow, Nick McLeod, Dr. Brenton, T. Blakemore, and Patriot Minute are all a part of our community over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And I have not forgotten, but our incredible mods, all the people in the wrench over on YouTube, the people who help over on Locals, the people who are a part of the show and help kind of keep the community thriving. We've got to talk about, some mod rules and some things about, encouraging free and open conversations on the channel. And so I'm not real sure how to do this quite yet, but Keep your eyes peeled if you are a supporter over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Very likely we'll have a live stream that we'll do at some point, as soon, of course, whenever is convenient for the moderators. And we'll have a conversation about the future of the show. And so I'm looking forward to that. Keep your eyes peeled if you're a supporter over there. We'll have some more conversations. But that, my friends, is it for us for the day. Have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. Spend some time with friends and family. And I will see you here next week. Bye-bye, my friends.